So what is pilling and how do we resolve it? In oil pastels usually occurs with cheap end oil pastels. It does occur with expensive oil pastels, and in fact I've had it occur with Sennelier oil pastels. Generally it's the cheaper end oil pastels, and generally it's the transparent type pastels. Now that does make a lot of sense, because if you think about it, cheap end oil pastels have more binder and less pigment. Well, in my head I would also say that's entirely the same for a transparent pastel. I would imagine there's more binder and less pigment, which makes it transparent. A bit like when you use one of them very clear blending pastels and then you put possibly an opaque colour on top of it. You will find that you could possibly get a transparent look from that. Again, it's adding more binder to the pigment, making it transparent. And again, that is why cheaper oil pastels are generally prone to pilling. I'm going to show what pilling is. So what is pilling? Pilling in general happens with finger blending. That's one of the reasons that I personally do not blend much with my fingers. If I am going to blend with my fingers, then it is that I have already done preliminary blending and I just then probably want to smooth out what I have blended. Now, what it does, if you can see this, I hope you can, I've done it on two types of paper. I've done it on this textured paper. I'm not going to tell you these are ideal, and I've done it on this lined paper so you can see for certain that this is a very, very smooth cartridge paper. You can see where colour and binder seem to have separated and just skipped across the paper. Now, I will demonstrate this with this pastel here. So this is a cheaper end pastel and I want to now blend it. So I get my finger and I blend it, and you can see it's just skipping across the paper. Now that in itself tells you you need a more textured paper. So I'll now do that on the more textured paper. We'll do that up here. It's the same pastel, and this is a Giorgione pastel, so one of the cheaper end pastels. So again, we will smooth this with our finger, and again you can see it's pulling away. It's separating. That is pilling. All this is pilling, okay? And as I said, it generally happens with your finger. Just to prove the point, on the more textured paper, I'm going to put a layer of this Giorgione oil pastel down. I'm going to get a clean cotton bud. I'm just going to lightly blend it. It will still pill, but it won't be as bad. And the reason for that is because it's a more cheaper oil pastel. So you can get a better blend with that. But that in itself tells you that you need a more expensive pastel. Now I'm going to do this with this Caran d'Ache pastel. I'm going to do it here. That goes on a lot smoother. You can feel the quality, that there isn't so much binder in it. But again, on a textured paper, albeit it's not as bad, you still get this pilling. Sorry, on a smooth paper. On a textured paper, and we'll do that here. Let's see what we get. No pilling whatsoever. Now that's because of the paper and because of the pastel. Now you need to work in light layers, and you need to suit your paper to your pastel. Smooth paper like this will never be any good for any oil pastel. It means to say that your computer printer paper is going to be no good. You can prepare them, I would expect, with gesso, maybe things like that, but is it worth it? So get a more textured, this is a watercolour paper, a more textured paper, and it gives the oil pastels something to grab onto. With an expensive one, it will grab better, and there isn't so much binder in it, so it's not going to pill. But with a cheap quality pastel, and I have another pastel here, which is a top level pastel, what they call a top level pastel. They look a bit like the Expressionists, but you'll see that's also doing the same. It's not as bad as these Giorgionis, but it is also doing the same. And the more pastel you put down, the more pilling you're going to get. You do usually find, as can be seen here, this was the top level pastel, that if you use a cotton bud on that one, that was my finger, but if you use a cotton bud, you can see that it would possibly be better without your finger. So most of the reason I never advocate finger blending. How would we rectify this? I did a picture some time ago, I'll show you, and look at the burgundy background behind the girl. I used Sennelier oil pastels for that entire picture. And when it came to putting on large areas, which is where this will occur, you will get pilling in large areas generally. When I started putting that on the background, that started pilling. And it's because it was transparent and it was a large area, and I was probably at the time doing it with my fingers. I can't remember because it was so long ago and it was one of my very early oil pastels. Okay, so how would you rectify that? Well, the most obvious thing is use better oil pastels and suit it to the paper. Now, I said about the Sennelier, that was just one of those things. It was more of a transparent and lack of experience as well. So use better pastels. It's not always going to be cost effective to buy a cheaper pastel. You can see that in here. Look at these. These are dreadful. This is a more expensive pastel, but again it's on the not so good paper, which is there. On a better paper, cheaper pastels again. Another way you can eliminate this is to blend lightly and not with your fingers. So use better pastels, blend lightly, don't use your fingers. You will not get so much pilling, if any. The thing you can do if you are using cheaper pastels and you find it starting to pill and you're not very happy about that, what you can do is you can scrape it off. So scrape it off and maybe start again, but try to use that experience to layer it on better. So try to blend it lightly out sometimes. Sometimes you might get this pilling, and if you've got that and then you just blend very lightly, you may be able to just blend it out and get rid of all this texture that you don't want. You need to just try and blend out gently. That's not the best option, but it's an option. Okay, you could possibly use spirits if you have to. I don't advocate using spirits on any oil pastels. I've used it once and I got myself into a right mess with it. It doesn't work for me. If it was going to work for me, it would probably just be as underlayers. So you could use spirits, you can scrape off, blend lightly, not with your fingers, and use better pastels. They are ways of rectifying the problems. What else makes a difference? Well, as I've kind of touched on, paper makes a difference. Smoother paper lends itself to pilling, so mistakes. A more textured paper gives the pastel something more to grab onto and something better to blend with, so it won't smooth and smear across the top of the paper. So there's a few ways of avoiding it. Personally, I would advise you, in my experience, humble as it is, to use better pastels and use a good paper, textured. Again, it doesn't have to be overly textured as long as it has some texture. But it must not be smooth because you are not going to get a good blend. That doesn't mean to say you can't use oil pastels on a smoother paper, it just means you have to use them differently. Hope that has helped everybody. It's quite a difficult subject to broach, and making these videos is quite difficult. It doesn't matter what you think, you may forget something. So if there's anything that I can tell you or help you with, please ask. I will help you as much as I can. So look out for the pilling. My advice is buy a better pastel. It might not have to be the top professional ones, but don't go for the student grade and don't go for the very cheap ones. The very cheap ones are, well, they are a waste of money. These are just my opinions for what they're worth. It doesn't mean you won't get problems with better pastels, but they are problems that can be overcome. And they are problems that, given the experience that you will gain from them, you will get over them. So, as I said, and I keep saying, blend lightly, use the right paper, use the right pastels. That's basically all there is to it. Anyway, I hope that's all helped. I hope I haven't waffled on too much for you. And whomever, wherever you are, have a great day, a great week, and a great year. And be kind. Bye for now.